pieces of land were going to be developed. And what they do is they have this option, they secure the land, and then they wait for the urban sprawl to catch up, or that town or city, whatever it is, to catch up to that area. And at that point, they exercise the option. So you can appreciate that these people, these big companies, could probably hold on to those options for a long period of time. So that's where it comes from. This developer has now made that technique available to individual purchasers, and it's not now reserved only for the big land purchase companies. Secondly, about what Stephen was saying, when you look at an off-the-plan contract of sale, the law, the Act actually says that the sunset clause, or the period of time in which a developer has a right to register their plan of subdivision, the wording in the Act actually says 18 months. But in practice, when you are a developer and you want to get finance from the bank to do your infrastructure and your construction finance, or whatever the case is for an off-the-plan purchase, you will find that 48 months is the usual period of time on an off-the-plan contract. The banks are insisting on that period of time because they know that there are delays, there's rain stoppages, strikes, etc. And they know that 2 to 3 years is nothing in a construction period of time. So 48 months is a normal period of time. Added to that, obviously, you've got to take into consideration what I said right at the beginning of this, and that is that you have to wait for the council to get their planning and the urban sprawl to catch up, and that adds to the 48-month period. So some of these developments, it's not unusual for an option period to be 6, 7, or 8 years. Obviously, I'm not a finance person, but it stands to reason that the longer you wait before you have to hand over all your money, the property hopefully is going to increase in value, and you're going to get a capital gain without having even purchased the property yet.
Okay, next question. When I've done options in New South Wales, my lawyer, solicitor, he charged me $5,000 per option, and they were relatively short periods of time. They were for 1 to 2 years. You've actually got a file open for up to 10 years, and this is the contract for this and the option is about 200 pages, just so that you know. It's very detailed, and what we've done is we've made sure there's a lot of protection in there for all of our members and our buyers, which myself, Conrad, all of us are actually buyers ourselves. So I've normally paid for a brief. So normally you pay for the option fee and you pay for the solicitor to actually help you, and then you pay them a brief fee as well to actually interpret the thing and explain it to you so it makes logical sense. So could you just explain how that fares in terms of cost? And I haven't told everyone your cost yet for your bulk rate.
Basically, you have to remember that a lot of the work here has already been done behind the scenes. And as I said previously, I've been asked to have input into the documentation before it was finalized. I've spoken to the barrister who gave the opinion on and settled the documents. So all of that work you would, on an individual basis, normally be paying me for. But here, it's part of my process of being involved with the vendor, so the vendor knows that they're giving a document and documents that have already been looked at by a purchaser's solicitor. So from that perspective, that cost is not passed on to you, obviously. That's all part of the process of negotiating with 21st Century. Then, as far as I'm concerned, if you went to the usual run-of-the-mill solicitor, you would pay anywhere between $2,000 upwards for an option agreement, especially an off-the-plan contract of sale option agreement, and specifically because this is going to be, a lengthy period of time. So we have negotiated bulk discounts per lot, and I think it works out to about 600 or 660 with GST for our legal fees. And obviously, if you buy more than one lot, you pay a little bit more, but it's also discounted further. So the fees are discounted, and definitely a lot lower than if you were dealing with an individual solicitor on an option agreement, which is not considered conveyancing. Remember that this is not the kind of work that a conveyancing company can do. This is only the work that a lawyer can do, because it's not considered conveyancing at this stage. It's only when you settle the off-the-plan contract of sale does it actually become conveyancing. And once again, obviously, we'd hope that you'd use us for that process down the track as well.
My last question is worst case scenario. Given that many people have heard about building developers going bust and it's halfway through, but this is land. So developers on land have to pay contributions to council, all this paperwork, that stays as value add. Could you just explain the differences there and how people are more protected in this?
Okay. First of all, I mean, the developer's a company. Worst case scenario, developer goes bankrupt and a liquidator or administrator is appointed. It's going to follow the same course as I've seen. Look, I've been involved with a lot of big developments where the builder or the developer, or whatever the case, has gone bankrupt. And usually what's going to happen is your liquidator or your administrator is going to come in and take over the development. And obviously that development has assets and liabilities. The asset is obviously the piece of land, and it has liabilities which, it has to pay contributions to council and all of that. So it's in the best interest of a liquidator to finish the project and get all the people who've bought in that development to actually finish their contract, pay their purchase price, and then at least they have the liquidation finished and all the costs have been paid. So that's usually what happens in these big developments. It's not as if you've got a company that's got no assets. This company will have an asset, and hopefully every year that we go into this process, the value of that land increases, because that's what happens with land traditionally in Australia. The value will go up each year. So each year, that liquidator, should they ever be appointed, will always have a piece of land that is going to appreciate in value. The other thing that you should know is that as the developer goes along the process of the plan of subdivision, the value of the land increases. I'm sure you all know that land with a permit is always valued at a much higher level than land without a permit. So as the developer puts in the planning applications, the contributions to council, the infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, the water, etc., all of that adds value to the land, because the ultimate product is going to be worth a lot more than what it is today. And that's why these kind of opportunities are unique, because you can secure that property at a basement level price, as opposed to in 5 years' time when the developer has spent all of that money and now has to recover it. So it's a lot harder for them to do it at that stage. You're going to pay more. At this point, you're getting in at basement level before they have to incur all that cost.
Okay, we'll just take a couple more questions from the audience. Who's got a question? Over there, one. Just your name and your question.
Steve, can you sell your option at any stage to somebody else?
There is no legal prohibition on selling an option. And I stand corrected, but in the option to purchase, I think all you have to do is advise the vendor that you are selling the option, and I don't think they can unreasonably withhold that. So my feeling is that there may be a secondary market down the track for the selling of options, just as you do on, say, the stock market, where you can buy put and call options on shares.
I'll expand a bit more of that this afternoon. Gentleman over there.
We live in a time and age when corporates are falling like 10 pins. And I'm not referring to property darling, but if $50,000 is collected from each person into 100, that works out to 5 million. And I'm just going to extrapolate that from that and say that a huge sum of money is lying with an organization for 10 years. Anything can happen in those 10 years. How do you safeguard the investors?
Well, first of all, remember that the advice I give you today is not financial. It's purely from a legal perspective. I can't tell you whether this is a good investment or a bad investment. That obviously you have to do, and other people will have to advise you on that. But as far as I'm concerned, the way I look at it is that you have a line, and on that line you have on the one side your conservative lawyer like me, maybe possibly at the one end of the scale, and on the other end of the scale you have the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the person who's willing to take risks, who's willing to try and invest in things and get a good return. So where you have to decide your place on that line is obviously a personal thing. You need to decide, am I at the one end, the other end, or somewhere along the middle. Most of us are going to probably be somewhere along the middle. And when you make that decision, you obviously have to take into consideration the contract documentation, the off-the-plan contract, all the paperwork and all the protection. So that's a very important thing. Now, bear in mind that you have obviously directors acting here. There's fiduciary duties. The directors have to do the right thing. In the contract, the option to purchase, there are certain contractual obligations that have to be adhered to. And obviously, you have the right to lodge a caveat if the developer is in default and has not rectified that default. So it's very much the same as any other property investment deal. You have to do your due diligence. You have to look at the pros and the cons and the negatives and the positives, and you have to make a decision as to whether you're going to go ahead or not. I mean, that's what you have to do. And you have to decide, you know, it's the same as buying BHP Billiton shares. Tomorrow China could collapse and BHP Billiton shares are going to drop right through the floor. So everyone who thought they were holding these fantastic blue chip shares, no longer. It's the same with property. My personal opinion, and it's an opinion purely personal, is that I believe in land. It's there. It's not a piece of paper on a share or a stock market. And I believe land is always the way to go. Whether the insurance advisors and all those people are going to dispute that, but land is the most important asset, I believe, and the strongest asset we can ever own. And we're going to go through this period of time and it's going to pass. The same as 1929 and the global financial crisis and all these things. And we're going to have lots of bad times and good times ahead. But property's always escalated in value. It's never gone down over a period of time. So I don't know if that gives you a general...
I'll just add two more things, if I may. Number one, the money actually doesn't just sit in the organisation, because a lot of it goes to contributions to council and to pay for advisors, and that actually adds value to the whole process. In fact, if a developer goes bust on land, a bank is likely to actually finish the development because it's paper shuffling, whereas if it's a building, they'll actually on-sell it to another builder because it's far too complicated. So a lot of that money gets spent with getting reports or advisors or paid to the council, and that adds value along that process. But let me be clear, for some of you with a different risk profile, for some of you this won't be for you. You'll have to wait till retail, and that may be a safer time to actually get into the deal. The only thing is that at retail, you'll be paying a different price. So you've got to weigh up exactly where you are on that continuum, and if you understand this process and it makes sense and it satisfies your due diligence, then maybe you should act. If not, then don't worry about it.
If I can just add something also, touching on what that gentleman said there. I've been involved in a lot of option deals over the years, and we're getting to the 5 or the 6 year period in some of those situations. And what we're finding is that people are selling their options, and there is a secondary market for those options. But more importantly, exactly what you're saying, the value of the land has increased both because of natural increases of the land values in Australia, but also infrastructure and planning and all of that has added to the value as well. And I'm seeing it in actual developments, both in Melbourne and in country Victoria and in other areas of Australia. So it is happening, and I've seen it in some of my files and clients as well.
Okay, I think there was one last question over here.
You mentioned that developers, they can cancel the option the first 2 years and refund the fee. Is it possible that they just cancel it because they think the price has gone up so much that it's worth it that they resell it in a higher price to another party?
I suppose in a strict sense they could do that if you have an unscrupulous developer. But then they're going to incur extra costs of selling. I mean, obviously at this point in time, the developer's paying these guys to do the sales. They've got a lot of work that goes into it. And my feeling is that most developers generally are in the business of selling their property. Once they've sold their property and they've done all their development, they move on to the next one. It's very unusual, and I mean, people always worry about that people, on an off-the-plan contract will wait for the sunset clause to expire and then they'll just not do the development. But I think you also find that there's a time is of the essence clause in the contract and the option agreement, which says that they have to do what needs to be done now, and if they delay, they're in default, and in some cases the directors could be in breach of their fiduciary duties. So yes, it is possible, but in practice, people are there to make money, and they're not going to do that generally. Also, I've been dealing with guys from 21st century and some of the people here for over 15 years. And, in 10 years or 15 years' time, we all hope to be doing this still. And if we do stuff like that, I'm not going to be in this business any longer. That's why, they refer work to me, because they know that I give a good service, I tell it as it is, and I look after my clients, and I hope that they do the same. And I know they do the same because I've seen it. It has a track record and a history. So I don't, that is possible, but, it's the old story that you lose your clients if you're going to do that.
There's nothing we can protect ourselves.
Well,
legally.
unfortunately, there is no protection really against an unscrupulous. Fraud is available to anyone at any time. You can't protect yourself 100%, and hopefully you're dealing with good people and a good organization. And a lot of you will probably have bought property previously, and you'll see that the system works.
So
That's
there's no clause
no.
in the option contract to say they cannot resell it within, let's say, 6 months or 1 year if they cancel it, if the developer themselves.
There is no clause that says that, but 2 years will come and go very quickly, and I'm sure you'll see that that's not going to happen. But I suppose that's something that I leave to Stephen or the consultants to.
Yeah, they'll probably have to cancel everyone's, and they'll need those for pre-sale, so they wouldn't want to do that anyway. So, but yeah, we'll cover that. One quick last thing, because I remember we spoke about this once before. If the council changes the plans of, you've picked your block and they've said we're going to put an easement of a sewerage line or something through there, just tell us what the options are. Would you mind?
Okay. In an off-the-plan contract of sale, as I said, the size and the dimensions of the lot that you are getting. The developer always has the right to make minor amendments to that lot because the council has asked them to do it, or there's some reason for it because of the planning approval or whatever the case is. They have the right to make minor amendments. If they make a major amendment, then you have the right to cancel the contract. And the rule of thumb for a major amendment is anything more than 5% of the size or the location. That's what the courts say. There's no actual law that says that, but that's pretty much what the precedents in the courts have said. Having said that, remember that in the option to purchase, there's also the ability for them to increase or decrease the size of the lot that you're buying. If that happens, then there's a formula in the option agreement that lets them calculate on the land value at the day, based on your price, an increase or a decrease in the price if the property is increased or lowered. So it's a fair option for either the purchaser or the vendor. But once you enter into the contract of sale, it's pretty much the straightforward rules. Major changes not allowed, minor changes are generally allowed less than 5%. Does that answer that?
Okay, I know Colin needs to go, so when you get a chance, you'll get a chance to sit with the consultants. They can give you a copy of Colin's brief if you choose to use Colin. I'm just going to tell them the price. It's normally you would pay like I have a solicitor who specialises in property, and for such a long period, at least $5,000 per contract. The deal that Colin has done for our members, it's $660. Now, some people pay more than that just for a conveyancer who doesn't do 90% of this work. So and you get included in that the brief, which would normally cost a separate $2,000, because for Colin to read normally a 200-page document and give you a brief on that, he would charge his time. Does that make sense? So we've got an incredible deal from Colin, because many of our members have not just bought one, but they've often, some of our other deals, bought 7 at a time. And realistically, it's just the lot number that changes on this. So you don't have to use Colin. What we want to do is suggest to you that he's very knowledgeable. He's done a great deal for our members. But it's up to you at the end of the day. We're going to hand out his card to everyone, so you make sure you've got a card, and when you see the consultants for your appointment, they'll give you his information. If you choose to sign up and use him, they'll give you a copy of his brief as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, once he becomes yours, you can call him and speak to him anyway. I don't know what he charges for that, but...
Let me say, once you sign up on, say, this lot, that price covers calling me, coming to meet with me, whatever it takes for you to understand this development. That's the price inclusive deal that we have. On my card, you'll see my telephone number. I have an office in the suburbs. I also consult out of the city. In fact, most of my consultations are done in the office in the city, so it's preferred if you come into the city. But yes, that you could, once you've got the contract documentation, give me a call, book an appointment, whatever you want to do. As I said at the beginning, this is all about my practice development. It's for me to get you guys, and hopefully you're going to sign up and do other work with me. So that's how I develop my law firm. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank you
the
very much,
opportunity.
Colin. Good to see you.
And enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And you have my details if you want to call me.
Okay, all right. Put your hands together for Colin Adno. Thank you. So, what we're going to do right now is I want you to think about because Colin covered a whole lot of ground there. I want you to think about the most important thing you picked up from Colin, because we've got a whole lot more information to come. And if you don't write something down, I guarantee you'll forget it. So think about the most important thing you picked up from Colin, go to the second last page in your book and make a note of it, something you learned, something key, and then in 30 seconds you get to stand up and teach someone else something you learned. So, bit of music, off you go, you've got 30 seconds. Now, so I had Colin speak a little bit earlier than what I expected, but because I want to just talk about land now, but much of the stuff that Colin talked about will make a lot of sense as I go through and explain to you the deal that we've done. By the way, as part of the option agreement that we've negotiated, it's got all these extra things in there that a normal option agreement doesn't have. In many cases, option agreements, they don't have cooling off periods. Ours not only has 3 days, it makes sure you get up to 5 days. So it gives you more time. It's also got the ability to not have to come up with the premium up front. You can have a 12-month payment plan on it as well. Again, that's something different. Normally in a contract, when you settle, you actually have a covenant, which is a restriction that says you must build within 12 months. For our members, we've negotiated up to 3 years. So we've got a whole list of things that we've actually got in there. Like another part of our option agreement is that it's a call option only. Normally a developer will insist on it being a put and call because they will use that towards pre-sales. So what we've done is, because of all of our knowledge and our skill of our team, and because we've been through this so many times over the years, we've kept refining and refining and refining till we've got to what we believe is almost best practice. And I think I was actually surprised what Colin said, that some of the other big law firms are using some of the clauses that we've been using in many cases for a long time and developing. So you certainly, in my opinion, have some of the best people on your team to help you with this. Okay. Also, the right to caveat, and to what they're working on is to have what's called a master caveat that says that no more than 50% LVR on the land, and that everyone who's a subordinate caveat is equal ranking. So there's all these sorts of things that when you sit down with the consultant and you get a copy of the brief, there's a lot more behind the scenes that you will need to understand, and you can just speak to Colin on the phone and have all these extra safety mechanisms explained to you, and all these special privileges that 21st Century Property Direct members get access to that retail clients will not get any access to. Okay, but that'll all be in your brief document. Okay, so we talked about property, did we not? Come on, yes or yes? Yes. All right, so we talked about all the drivers. We also talked about the fact that long term it's done really well, but short term it's been a little bit bumpy. Agreed? There's one part of residential property that has kept on moving very strongly. Now you know which part that is. It starts with an L. What is it? Land. So in terms of land, the best way to understand it is that houses, they depreciate and they physically sit on land, and what does the land do? It appreciates, and it's the ratio of the house to land that determines the overall growth of this asset. So to put that into a simple principle, a house on a quarter-acre block generally grows faster than a townhouse on a smaller block, which generally grows faster than a two-bedroom apartment in a three-storey walk-up, which generally grows faster than a similar-sized two-bedroom apartment in a high 20-storey building. Does everybody understand that? Because what diminishes is the scarce factor, which is the land. So by the time you get to a high-rise, as part of your overall cost, the amount of land you're getting might be the size of a beer coaster. Does everybody follow that? Say yes, please. Yes? All right. So if we go back up the value chain, what's the step before the old house on the quarter-acre block? What's before that?
The farmer's land.
The quarter acre block, right? Well, before that is the farmer's land, of course, but just in terms of illustrating that point, it's the quarter acre block because it has the most land value in it. Make sense? So this is one of the basic principles that we actually go by, and we actually want to know, well, if there's more land in it, it's going to grow more. Now, you want to actually understand, well, does all land grow the same, do you think? Or do some sorts of land grow faster and more often? Yes or no? So we want to get not just the best, not just more land, but we want the best land. All right? The easiest example that I like for that is, do you ever watch those nature films shot in Alaska and there's these big brown bears in the streams and the salmon are jumping out of the water? You've seen all those, right? And they grab the salmon in their mouths and they eat them, right? Yep. Do they eat all the salmon? No, they don't. And I didn't know this. What part of the salmon do they eat?
The best.
The best bits, which is the brains and the eggs. Caviar. Well, okay, I don't eat seafood anyway. But it's like, some people don't eat the crusts on pizza, right? Because the best bits is what they want. So in thinking that way as an investor, do you want the bits that don't grow as much or the bits that grow the most and make you the most amount of money? That's the thought process, okay? So in terms of the land, we need to understand what are the drivers that make it grow, okay? And you want to have as much manufactured growth as humanly possible, agreed? You want that price to just keep walking and walking and walking all the way up for as long as possible, agreed? So if you can understand that some land does that and some land does not, which one of those two would you prefer? The one that keeps walking up, agreed? Now, there's a gentleman he's a property economist out of Queensland, and his name is Michael Matusik. Has anyone heard of Michael Matusik or the Matusik report? Okay, Michael's done a whole lot of back testing, and what he found was that if you look at property, that 80% of the money that you'll make in property, well, there's three types of money that you'll make. One is called capital gains. One is called cash from rent, and one is called cash from tax deductions or tax refunds, right? That's the three types of money you're going to make. Now, guess which one of these makes you the most amount of money? The capital gains. In fact, the capital gains, he calculated by backtesting a lot of properties, is that will make you 80% of all of your money. 20% will come from these two. So if you're one of these Alaskan bears, would you you want to eat the brains and the eggs to get the best nutrition, the most highest calorie before you go in hibernation? This is the one you want, not this. Who follows? All right? So you should always be asking yourself, how do I get the maximum amount of capital gain that I can afford? Now, normally when people buy negatively geared properties, it's hard because they have to afford the cash flow. Under our system, you don't have to worry about that, right? Because it's really just around the capital growth. So, in terms of land, what makes land grow? Well, I'm sure you've seen pictures like this, open paddocks, jungle or sand or bush, that one day becomes under someone's vision who can think down the track. They put a plan in to the decisioning authority, which is usually the local council, but in some very big deals, it's the state government. They put their plan in, it gets adjusted, a little bit of argy-bargy negotiation, and then it ends up looking like that. Who has seen that in parts of Victoria, New South Wales, other parts of the world? Is this common?